To Growth, and I am one of the co-hosts, Yashika Benford, and I am excited to have you on the show. Can you tell the audience hello today?
I'm glad to be here, Yashika. There is no place in the world I would rather be than chat with you right now. So I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Awesome. I am so excited. Look, you have poured so much into people, and we just want to learn about everything that you have done, that you're doing now, and that you will continue to do. So, we're going to dive right into the questions. Is that okay?
Let's do it. It'll be fun.
All right. So you've dedicated so much of your life to helping those people who are hurting,
Yeah.
and you've gone through your own personal experiences with that. That led you to create a ministry, the Steps Ministry. So, talk about how your own personal experiences led you to create that ministry.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to ask the question because when I think back about my life, I think a majority of it, I was pretty much focused on me rather than other
Right.
people, which is often the case, I believe. It's kind of that's the state of the human condition, I
It
believe.
is. It is.
So I was a nice enough guy when I was young, but I was kind of living my life for me, and got married at 30 and had kids. And that was kind of a breakthrough for me to actually start caring about people a little bit more than me. But then, things were going along pretty good. Yashika, life was good. My job was good. I had a great family. I was carrying sort of a hidden secret that not many people knew about, that I was a high functioning alcoholic, but I
Wow,
kept it so
see?
hidden. And I even tried to hide it from myself and from God at times.
Wow.
We're
Let's
pretty
talk
clever
that
at
you're
that. You
saying
know?
some stuff. Yes.
And then unfortunately things got worse before they got better. So it turns out, that my wife had an alcohol problem as well, and she
Wow.
kind of lapsed into a period of depression, and then
Mhm.
our family went into what I look back and call the dark ages,
Yes.
which our older son, when he got into middle school, we moved to another city, and he picked a group of friends that were making some bad choices, and he started going down a road that for about 10 years took him to a really dark place.
Wow.
So between me and my wife and my son and things like that in a family lead to lots of other problems, as you can guess. So
Yeah.
times were really, really hard for us. And I, my wife and I decided that we just couldn't go on living this way. Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I found myself at a point in time where I was going through the world of recovery for myself and as a husband, and as a dad, all at the same time. So interestingly, that's when things really started to get better. I had two things going for me, right? One is, I knew God had been on my side, even though I'd been kind of hiding this part of my life from him, or
Yes.
thinking that I was.
Thinking, yes.
You know, but to me, the world of recovery was exciting. Because I saw that some of the world's worst problems are actually very treatable, and in many
Wow.
cases preventable. And the
Yes.
way that we prevent them is we learn to live life the right way, and that happens to be aligned with how God wants us to. So
Yes.
the recovery was actually a very exciting time, and that's where I think I really got this notion. A lot of people come out of recovery, right,
Right.
and they come at it with feeling more humble and more self-aware, and a greater desire to serve other people, and it certainly affected me that way.
Right.
So I came out of it feeling blessed. That we had some tough times, and
Yes.
I wouldn't wish those on anybody. But when I look back, I wouldn't change them for anything. God
Wow.
does His most creative work in our toughest times.
Yes. In
You know,
in what
and
looks like a mess.
it
Yes.
does. It does. We all look like a mess at
Yes.
times, but
Yes.
that's when God's being really creative. And so
Yes.
I just came out of that thinking, why in the world do so many people and their families go through this?
Hmm.
Because a lot of, there are problems that just happen, right?
Hmm.
And some of them are very mysterious. There are circumstances that some people are subject to, and things just happen sometimes. Tough things happen.
Yes.
But we also bring on or escalate our problems ourselves by the choices we make. And whether we come from good circumstances or bad circumstances, the
Right.
choices we make,
Yes.
send us in
Yes.
a different direction. And
Yes.
I just really got excited about wanting to share with other people, things that have been proven to work for a long time for millions of people and help them live life better. And these days, when I see people that are struggling, it does hurt, because I
Yes.
know I've been there and I know
Right.
what it feels like. And anything we can do to help hurting people feel better and find more hope and purpose and meaning and in their lives, that's what we're trying to do. So
And definitely, I mean, you have so many key points because not only were you dealing with it, you mentioned your spouse, you mentioned, your son, which we're going to even talk more about that with, about teenagers. So, I mean, you've definitely lived through it. So you have the testimony to share with other people. I'm not just speaking something, but
yeah,
I know what it's like to be an overcomer. I love that.
yeah.
Now, at Steps Ministries, you focus on healing purpose, and life skills. So, can you break down how your approach help people move from survival mode to thriving?
Yeah, I'll speak in a general sense because
Mhm.
STEPS has some methodologies that we include in our resources and education. We can talk about those if we like, but
Mhm.
in a general sense, I'll talk about it at three levels. One is because healing or living is a process,
Mhm.
and it starts with our mindset, and then
Right.
from there we hopefully can develop the life skills to make some good choices, but then it becomes a matter of living one step at a time. So
Mhm.
if you think about mindset and life skills and one step at a time, I think that's the formula. Mindset comes from, are we going to be focused primarily on ourselves, or are we going to be
Wow.
focused on things that are bigger than us? And I
Love
would
that.
suggest those
Wow.
include purpose and other people and hopefully God.
Mhm.
And depending on where our worldview or our mindset is, everything else is different, right? The view that we bring to the world affects how we feel about everything.
Right.
And I think there's five, I'll call them values, that make up our mindset that shape the foundation for how we feel about things. And those are meaning. Do we think life has meaning?
Right.
Purpose. What am I here to do?
Mhm.
Identity. Who am I? Contribution. What am I? What have I been created to give? And then community. How am I going to do that with other people? So getting our mindset so that we're not just self-absorbed and focused on our own pleasure in the moment, but maybe something bigger is the start. And it's interesting to say that too, because when people are hurting, they don't know it, but that draws you inward. If you think about depression,
Yeah.
right? Depression means I, I just don't see any way out. It becomes a self-absorbing function. And by the way, I'm not saying that people who are depressed, quote, are self-absorbed. I'm just saying
Right.
the process makes us look inward. So
Yes.
does anxiety, right? We get focused on our problems and our issues and our worries. The addiction is the same way, right?
Yeah.
We
I
want
was
to
just
feel
thinking
good
about that
in the
when you were
moment.
saying that. Yeah.
If we get our mindset right.
Hmm.
Second, if we decide to work at it, we can develop life skills to live life better.
Hmm.
There's a lot of wisdom out there in the world, right, to help people live better mentally and emotionally and spiritually and personally and socially. And but you wonder, right? And you think about this with kids or with teenagers, but also with all of us, with adults. Where do people learn how to live life effectively?
Wow.
I mean, hopefully we have some parents who are conveying some
Right.
things. Maybe we're in the church, but
Right.
really, most people kind of make it up as they
Right.
go along. We starting when we're young, we're looking for ways to avoid pain and feel the way we want to feel.
Yeah.
And so we develop these strategies, and sometimes they're counterproductive. So the second step, right, is just to take some time to develop some life skills, and
Mhm.
we can talk more about that. And then the third is take it one step at a time.
Wow.
When we're sad or anxious or have an addiction problem or going through a trial, life can seem overwhelming. It
Mhm.
really can. And it seems like everything is going wrong. But it's been proven across many, many, many disciplines that we can change things. and we can even start
Yes.
a process of transformation one step at a time.
I love
So
that.
the key is always just to get into motion.
Yes.
Do something that moves us in a positive direction and build some positive momentum, and that gets us started. So overall, I'd say those are, the big three things: is make sure you get your mindset in the right place,
Mm.
spend a little time trying to develop life skills so that you can cope with life effectively, and then take it a step at a time.
Yes. And before we move on, let's talk about the mindset, because you kind of like, you talked about that piece, and that piece, what hurts or affects a lot of people is, like you say, they've made up things along the way and it has worked for them in a sense. So they try to hold on to what has worked once upon a time. So, how do you help people navigate through trying to leave what once worked but evolve into what's necessary now?
Yeah. Well, part of it I think is awareness. Because you
Mhm.
say we do things that we think worked for us,
Mhm.
but very often we develop habits that work for a short period of time. Like with me, a classic example was alcohol, right?
Mhm.
Alcohol works, for a
For
little
the
while.
moment, for you.
I mean,
I mean, a
people,
moment.
people drink or use drugs for a
Yeah.
reason, right? Because
Mhm.
it makes them feel better for a little while.
Yeah.
It works till it doesn't work anymore, and then
Wow.
so it fools you, right? And a lot of
Yes.
times we develop habits, right? Say you develop a habit for dealing with people who are angry at you, right? One habit could be you bow up on them, right? And you say, well,
Mhm.
I'm just going to be aggressive, and that might work at first,
Mhm.
but not in the long run, right? You return
Right.
anger with anger, it's not going to work.
Right.
Or you may say, well, I'm going to get away from this. Anytime somebody disagrees with me, I'm just going to retreat. And that
Yeah.
may work for a little while, but it won't work for a long while,
Right.
because
Right.
then we find ourselves retreating into isolation and trying to deal with life that way. So I think awareness is a lot of it. And a lot of people, even, I'm a good bit older than you, I would guess, but a lot of people, even in at my age, they don't know what they don't know, right?
Right.
They
So
they
good. Yes.
they've developed these habits of, I'm going to stay busy and I'm going to keep trying to do these things, and I know I'm going to be anxious all day long, and I'm feeling insecurities inside, but I'm not going to tell. They think that's what life is just
Right.
like, but they don't know what they don't know. They
Right.
they don't know that no, they can have better relationships.
Right.
They can find more peace. They can have a deeper sense of meaning and purpose.
Right.
So a lot of it, I think, is just getting people to think differently and think bigger and broadly and think outside themselves and think longer term, and give them encouragement and hope.
And know that
That,
it's
that
more
that
to
life can be
learn.
better. Life
Yeah.
can be better. You know.
Yes, love that. Love that.
Yeah.
So you often say anyone can take steps to improve their life. What would you say to someone who's listening that's
Yeah.
still in that gutter moment, still stuck, and they're saying to themselves, I don't really see how that can happen for me. Like, and they also feel like that sense of being unworthy. Some
Yeah.
people just feel like they're unworthy for God to come see about little them. So what would you
Yeah.
say to that listener?
Um, I'll answer that in two parts, if I could.
Yes.
I'll do them in the reverse order.
Hmm.
For people who are unworthy, and like, for example, Steps Ministries delivers resources and education to a number of audiences, to parents, but also to teenagers,
Hmm.
and also to hurting individuals in general. So we've done some education for underserved and at-risk teenagers,
Hmm.
right? And these are kids who've grown up in places where they don't have any positive role models,
Right.
and nobody's ever taught them that there's something bigger than them, and they're in survival mode,
Right.
and they're always fronting and acting a certain way for self-defense, whether they know
Hmm.
it or not. And so in that, we try to help them understand that, spiritually and emotionally and socially and mentally and even personally, life can be better than that. And
Right.
and that, but they need to learn the life skills to do that. So so part of it is giving them a practical understanding that there are things they can do, right? They don't have to change their life today.
Right.
You know, for example, you know, a lot of kids in 10th grade in some schools, you know, maybe they've been failed upward 2 or 3 times, right? And they're now insecure in their school. So therefore they give up trying and it gets worse, right? Well, that's because maybe they've never learned how to learn, right? So
Right.
if you just give them some simple tips about
Mm-hmm.
listening skills and paying attention and taking some notes and reviewing things, you give them a little bit of confidence.
Right. Yes.
So you let
Yes.
them see that, you know, there are little things you can do that'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
So one is you help them understand that progress is possible.
Yes.
Um, you
I
know,
love that.
and you know, but yet, you know, you said something very core, which is when people feel like that there's just no chance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, with teenagers, but also with much older people, because we all struggle with the same things.
Right.
Right. A little while ago, I mentioned that there are these 5, I guess, values that sort of form foundations for
Mm-hmm.
our mindset, how we think about the world. I mentioned meaning, purpose, identity, contribution, and community. And one thing you can do is you can go through with each of those, and if you can help people understand that they have meaning, right? Life
Yes.
does have meaning, no matter what their circumstances are, right? That there is a God who created them and
Mm-hmm.
who created the world, and that there is meaning to life.
Yes.
And let them know that they have an identity, right? They have been created special. They are the only person just like them on the world, yeah, in
Yes.
the world. And even if they don't see themselves as tremendously talented and all they see are their flaws, there are things that they are meant to do. So that identity then therefore leads to their purpose.
Yes.
There are people they can touch and things can achieve in their life that they and only they can do. So you walk through these areas and help them see that, you know, they have inside of them meaning and purpose and identity. And so, you know, they're not starting from ground zero, that they
Right.
are a person who has worth and value. But then again, you go back to reassuring them, but it's up to you to make the right choices, to take the right
Right.
steps,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
and you keep breaking it down into small things to help them. And, you know, I wouldn't use this example with teenagers, but adults I guess, may grasp onto this. There's one of the most famous books about forming good habits and dealing with bad
Mhm.
habits out there is a book by a guy named James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Oh,
And
I wrote that down as a book I need to
it,
get.
you know, in it, he mentions something called the 1% rule. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying this to make a point on the power of taking small steps.
Mm-hmm.
He says that if you improve yourself by 1% a day, now that's 1% a day, that's just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of a year, you'll be 37 times
Wow.
better than you were before.
That's
And it
huge.
actually works out that way. The math works out that way. So whatever you study, whether it's the Bible or recovery or psychology or personal development or habit formation, it's proven over and over again that you can change your life one small step at a time.
Wow.
So uh, and then I guess the other thing, and this is what I hope everyone who's hurting says is, you know, if
Yeah.
I was going to sum it up, what steps is all about, we try to provide help, healing, and hope. The first is
Mm-hmm.
help, what I've just been talking about. There are practical steps that you can take that will move you in the right direction, and we can help you know what they are. But the second is healing, which is encouragement. You
Yes.
know, when people are hurting, they think their world is dark and that they're the only one that's broken and they feel like
Mm-hmm.
they're alone.
Yeah.
But millions of other people have been there too. And
Yes.
most of them have gone on and lived a happy life. You know, so I want to encourage people that it can be done because others have been there too. And when you're hurting, you think you're the only one, but all your friends are hurting too. You know, they're just not talking about it, you know,
Right.
because that's what people do.
Yeah.
So, you know, so the healing is encouragement that when you're hurting, other people have been there. There are steps you can take to move in the right direction. And finally, it's hope, which is, you know, an assurance that your future can be better.
Mm.
You know, all you can do is get your mindset right, take steps in the right direction, and know that there's a God that loves you who's going to be with you along the way.
Yes.
You know, that
Love
doesn't mean that magically your circumstances are going to
it.
get better tomorrow,
Right.
you know, but you do have a positive assurance that life can be better. You know,
Love that. Love that. Look, you mentioned a lot about teenagers and of course, my professional career is an educator. My husband is an educator. So we are all about pouring into youth. So when I saw that you do focus on that, it just was so just brought straight
Yeah.
joy to my
Yeah.
heart, because sometimes the teenager can be misunderstood,
Yeah.
like big time,
Yeah.
and overlooked. So for that, when it comes to that, we often overlook them when it comes to life coaching. But why is that so important to teach preteens and teenagers life skills early, and how can parents and mentors start that?
Yeah. A lot of good questions in that. One is, if you just look at the facts, for example, let's use substance abuse and addiction as one
Mhm.
example. If you look at those people who wind up having a substance abuse or addiction problem, 90% of them started using before the age of 18. Or if you look at mental health conditions like anxiety or depression,
Mhm.
the significant majority of them start early in life, in the preteens or the teen years or something like that.
Mhm.
So it's just a fact that if you want to get upstream of those kind of things and maybe prevent them from happening or lessen their severity, you need to be working with people when they're young.
Wow.
Secondly, you just look at how people grow up. By the time you're 15 or 16 or 17, you've already developed these life skills, whether you know it or not. You may not be mature in the eyes of the world, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
things you don't know, but you've already figured out what your strategies are on how you're going to deal with life.
Yeah.
And because, even in the preteens, right, people are, they're making up life on their own.
Yeah.
So it's just critical, right, to get to them early. The other thing is too is when they're early, maybe they're not as they're jaded about life, and
Mhm.
they're not as pushed down, and they haven't taken on this persona of toughness or
Mhm.
depression, that
Mhm.
maybe they're a little more open, right, and they're more willing to
Mhm.
be coached. So there's just a lot of reasons, and that's why yes, we care a lot about teenagers and reaching them directly,
Yeah.
but a lot of our work is with teenagers and with
Awesome.
coaches and caregivers and grandparents, because if you help them understand, what it's like going through the preteen and the teenage years,
Mhm.
then that's really, I think, the secret. So we do a lot of work with parents, and I'd be glad to talk about that if you'd like, but
Yeah,
because
and
it's really.
I was gonna ask you, do you see a lot where a lot of the issues from teenagers may stem from social media? Like, how does that play a part in that when you're helping
Yeah.
parents and mentors?
Yeah. I don't know if social media causes problems, but it certainly amplifies them and
Mhm.
exacerbates.
I
That's
like
for
how you
sure.
put that. Yeah.
Because you know, every kid is carrying an
Yeah.
addiction device around with them,
Mhm.
right? And one thing, like if you look at what an addiction is, right? Addiction is a habit we do over and over again that has negative
Mm.
consequences, and we find it hard to
Wow.
stop, right? So social media and our phone, teaches us to compulsively try to feel better for a few minutes over and
Wow.
over again, right? And
Wow.
and we're training our brain that when we do that, we get a little pleasure surge in our
Mhm.
brain, right? So you can absolutely get addicted to social media, and adults can as well. You'll see a parent, right? He'll try to punish their teenager and say, "Well, I'm going to take your phone away for a week," and
Yeah.
then what's the parent doing 2 minutes later, right? They're
On the
staring at
phone.
YouTube videos
Yeah.
or something like that.
Mhm.
So one is, it, digital addiction is a real thing, but I
Mhm.
think even deeper than that for teenagers, as they form their identity, they're going to have insecurities because all people do. But the
Mhm.
problem is they think they're the only one. So they see, all these TikTok videos and Instagram posts and everything. And it looks like everybody else is having a great time,
I know. I
you know?
know. We tell our
So,
teenagers that. Look,
y- you
everybody is
know,
going through this.
because that's what people put on TikTok or
Yeah.
Instagram,
Yeah.
right? And so they're sitting there now feeling insecure and wanting to fit in, and they say, well, it's just me. I'm the one that's broken because everybody else has it knocked. So it certainly can amplify the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait to share this with my teenager. Like, look, listen.
Yeah. Oh.
Look, this is another huge thing which kind of ties into teenagers. I'm sure you see it a lot, but anxiety is at an all-time high. Like, and we see it as early as like elementary school,
Yeah.
like with anxiety. So from a faith perspective and a mindset perspective, what are some of those daily strategies that people can utilize to help them deal with just worrying and fear?
Yeah. You're right. Anxiety is everywhere, certainly with
Yeah.
adults, but also even more so with young people. I mean, studies of older teenagers say that 2/3 of them will confess to having severe anxiety at times,
Wow.
not just
Wow. I
worry
know,
or stress.
severe.
So most teenagers will face anxiety, but again, you can't. It doesn't help to just say, "Well, just quit worrying about things,"
Hmm.
right? You have to help. I
And
think
I've
give
been
them
guilty of that,
it's easy to say that,
Mhm.
but if you break it down, there are practical skills they can do. For example, we have what we call an online toolkit, which is a set of resources for dealing with anxiety. And I think it would apply to teenagers, but also applies to adults. And it mentions 6 things, and each of them has kind of a practical application. Some of them will kind of echo these things that we've talked about before, but with anxiety, one of them is just to change people's expectation about anxiety, right?
Mhm.
We get so that we fear anxiety and we see it as the enemy. But guess
Mhm.
what? We're going to have some anxiety in our life.
Mhm.
There's going to be things that cause us stress and that worry about it. But we need to change our expectation and say, well, I'm not going to be scared of anxiety. I'm going to notice it when it comes, but I'm going to see it as an opportunity,
Right.
right? As an opportunity for me to make a choice. So drop this debilitating fear that when I start to feel anxious, I just need to roll up in a ball and put a blanket over my head,
Mhm.
but and say, okay, no, this is just a signal to me that I need to do
Love
something.
that. In my
You know,
mind, I was thinking sign, but yes,
yeah, that's
signal.
good.
Yes.
So that's the first one. The
Yeah.
second one is to deal with all the noise in our life, right? There's
Mhm.
so much clutter. And you talked about this. You got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of text and social media and messages coming at them and things going on. All that clutter just creates, tension in our world. But if we can just, I guess, learn to focus on one thing at a time and not get caught up in all that clutter and just say, what's the next thing I'm going to do is to kind of simplify life a little bit and not let all those things be swirling around in our head at the same time. So simplify and just try to take the next right step one at a time. So kind of deal with all the noise and the clutter that we have in our life. That's another thing to think about. But then you think about how, tension becomes worry and stress and
Mhm.
anxiety. So
Yes.
I mentioned 2 of the 6. Is it okay if I go through the other
Yes.
4?
Yes.
Okay. So then though, but sometimes we're going to feel tension, right? In other words, I'm not sure if I should do this or if I should do that, right? And I don't know what's quite right or wrong. And that I think really is where we've been talking about mindset
Mhm.
before, right? Is make sure that we just step back and don't get trapped or pulled into the weeds, but we just say, okay, overall, what's the big picture here, and
Mhm.
and what are my how am I feeling right now? And
Right.
our mindset it's been proven in research, right, that our mindset is adjustable. We tend to think that we're either just somebody who worries all the time or we're somebody who's calm all the time. And everybody
Mhm.
does have different personalities.
Mhm.
But our mindset is almost like the thermostat on your house, right? You turn it hot, you turn it up, and it's going to get hotter in the house. So you turn it down, and things are going to get cooler. If we notice our mindset, if we say, okay, right now, am I worried? In what degree am I worried, and why? And I do some things to kind of just chill a little bit and lower it. But just by focusing on it, we can adjust that level of tension. Um,
Wow.
There's another thing. The fourth, I guess, is when we're really worried. It's very often because A, we're either trying to control something we can't control, or B, we're scared of doing what we're supposed to do.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
and there's a tool that I don't know, you learn it in recovery, but I hope a lot of people may have heard it called the Serenity Prayer, right? The
Hmm.
Serenity Prayer
Yeah.
says, God, give me the serenity to accept the things I
Hmm.
cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a whole lot of wisdom in that. One is we think that we're supposed to change other people and change our circumstances and control outcomes. We don't control those things.
Right.
We don't control other people, right? We don't control the final outcome. What we do will lead us in a direction, and
Hmm.
we are in whatever our circumstances are. What we control is our mindset and the next
Hmm.
choice that we make.
Hmm.
So it's a tremendous relief to let go of this obsession with trying to control.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, that we worry about is making tough choices.
Hmm.
But sometimes we are called on to make tough choices. And just say, so God, is this something where it's the right thing to do, and I should have the courage to just step forward and do that? And so the Serenity Prayer is kind of a tool. It doesn't give you the automatic answer, but it
Right.
helps you think, okay, is this something I should let go of because I
Right.
don't control
Yeah.
it? Or
Yes.
if it's something where the right thing to do is to take action, and I just need a little courage, and then you ask God to help you know the difference.
Love that.
Um,
Yes.
I guess the last two tools I would mention is one is, okay, when we're feeling stress, right, and we're trying to, what we have a tendency to do is to react in the moment and react either impulsively or based on our emotions or compulsively, right? But again, if you study psychology or recovery or the Bible or a lot of different disciplines and you break it all down and make it very simple, there's three steps that we can take when we're trying to make a choice, or we're feeling our emotions,
Hmm.
or we're tempted to do something. And the steps are very simple. They're to pause, evaluate, and choose.
Love
You know,
that.
if you're feeling worried or you're feeling tempted to do something, pause. Just don't do anything for a minute and
Hmm.
just step back from it, and don't get caught up in the moment. Just give yourself a little time to breathe,
Hmm.
you know, and then evaluate, what should I do now? And there's actually something going on in our brain when we do that, right? I mean, the part of our brain that reacts to emotions, it is separate from the part of our brain that thinks and considers things.
Wow.
So if we actually get our brain to think logically and evaluate, okay, will that work better or will that work better? We're actually dealing with those emotions better.
Hmm.
So we pause, evaluate, and then and only then do we choose the next step. So that's one thing to deal with anxiety. And the one I'll close with is get some help. In
Hmm.
other words, whether we have a little worry or debilitating anxiety,
Hmm.
one is get help from other people, is talk
Yeah.
to somebody about it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there,
Yes.
there's something transformative that happens when we share what's going on with someone else.
Yeah.
Just getting it out there lets lessens the
Yes.
weight of what we're carrying. And we don't have to depend on the other person to fix it for us, but just talk to someone.
Yes.
Um, and then maybe find someone who's kind of been there before and get some help from them. But then finally, the ultimate help comes from God, right? No, God
Yes.
knows what we're going through.
Yes.
He knows how we're designed. He designed us, right? And he's not worried about what's going to happen. He understands. He empathizes with our situation. So so the other is just get some help. We have a
I
tendency
love
to
that.
keep everything to ourselves. So talk to somebody, talk to God. And
I
so
love
I,
that.
I just rattled off six things. I know that was a lot.
That's
You could,
good.
but,
That
but
is good.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So we have all that, in a set of resources on dealing with anxiety. Anybody can find on our website if they're interested in following up. So
Love that. We talk a lot about living intentionally. You hear that phrase, you hear people talk about that all the time. But what does that really look like to live with purpose and really live life out to the fullest without that sense of being overwhelmed?
yeah. Um, I guess I'll give the first answer with how we would talk about it with parents, right? Because living intentionally is built into a lot that we do, that Steps does, because all of us have this tendency to react emotionally or react
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
compulsively.
Hmm.
We just feel a certain way, and we allow ourselves to feel that way, and we don't do anything about it.
Hmm.
So, with parents, we build living intentionally into our methodology for parents, which we call PACES for parents. And PACES is another acronym. It means preparation, awareness, connection, education, and steps. But I try to contrast, you know, one is being intentional means being proactive.
Yes.
Rather than waiting for something to react and then in the moment just
React.
letting
Yeah.
our emotions lead
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
keep your eyes open and look
Hmm.
where things are going and
Hmm.
anticipate what's going to be the outcome of this choice or what's going to do that. So be, I guess, proactive as part of it.
Hmm.
Another is just to seek balance rather than being swung one way or the other by a person that's around us or by our emotions or how we feel. Just step back and seek a little balance. Another is to be thoughtful, rather than just leaping to a choice because it seems easiest or it seems what our friends are doing. Just again, pause, evaluate, and choose for a moment. Be a little more thoughtful about it.
Hmm.
And then, so I guess those are some of the core skills that come into to being more intentional. But we've got an online course on that if anybody needs it. You called
Awesome.
Living More Intentionally, and it really again starts from just paying attention to how we make the choices that we make, and spending a little time to learn some of these life skills
Mhm.
so that we can be more thoughtful and more balanced in what we do.
Love that. Look, Steve, you have shared so many great things today. Can you share with the people, because you've mentioned different pieces that they may benefit from? Can you share with them how they can find you online or social media so they can tap into the resources you
Yeah.
have?
But they can find resources on everything I've been talking about at our website, which is lifeimprovementsteps.com. It's kind of long, but hopefully you can remember it, lifeimprovementsteps.com. And you can find resources on dealing with anxiety, living intentionally, parenting teenagers, all these things we've talked about. On Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, we're at, Life Improvement Steps. Now, I know all the teenagers are still on Facebook, just like their grandma. No, yeah, but we are at least on. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube, and maybe we'll be on TikTok soon. We'll see. But we're at lifeimprovementsteps.com on social media, and our website is, excuse me, Life Improvement Steps is our handle, and lifeimprovementsteps.com is where they can find the website. So,
I love it. Well, Steve, I have enjoyed the conversation and I
yeah,
have my own nuggets,
yeah.
especially for my teenager. So we just appreciate you so much for being with us on our podcast, From the Gutter to Growth. All right, audience, until next time, you be blessed. See you later.